And we're live. Actually, we're back on live. Good evening, I suppose I should say. It's 6 minutes past 6, but even so, it's not too late to start our discussion today. As you well know, the people who follow my page, I published last year a book dedicated to the emotional health of teachers, and I know that in this book I haven't written anything about the physical safety of teachers. I mostly focused on the psychological safety of the role of teaching. After the incidents that occurred before the Easter holiday, what I called the dark or the black week in education. And here I have in mind the incident with the Japanese teacher being stabbed by her own student, and the English teacher being videotaped while she was trying to teach her lesson, and being sexually assaulted by her own students. So these two incidents I have in mind when I call that week the dark week or the black week of education. For me, it was very uncomfortable watching the viral videos, and I have the courage to say that I was not prepared to go back to school after the Easter holiday, meaning it was hard for me to look into the eyes of my students, knowing that they also watched the videos. They were also exposed to this kind of news. And I started asking colleagues from other countries, other educational systems, how is the role of teaching perceived in their societies, in their cultures? Do we have anything in common? Do we have differences? How can we manage the differences? How do they handle aggression and physical safety in their systems? And I had as a guest a friend of mine, Maria Vakian from Italy, 2 weeks ago, and tonight I have Paul Freeman, whom I met a couple of years ago before the pandemic years in a solo adventure, and we continued this relationship through most of the pandemic years. We had Zoom meetings with students discussing about topics related to personal growth, to somehow trying to support them, to stand next to them, to the students during the pandemic years. And thank you, Paul, for accepting the invitation to talk about the image of the teacher in the UK.
I'm glad to be here.
Paul, tell us a few things about yourself. What is it that people should know about Paul? What is it that Romanians, especially Romanian teachers, should know about you?
It's difficult to say. I have the impression that I don't want to sound as if. Do you know the expression "blowing my own trumpet"? Like giving myself bouquets of flowers. I don't know. I think I have the impression that I think Romanian teachers, but not only Romanian teachers, the other nationalities that we used to receive, I think I would say, even though it's not for me to say, that I think the teachers liked the fact that I enjoyed what I was doing, because a lot of them said I was enthusiastic. A lot of them said I was very funny and quite active. And I think actually you can't be those things in the classroom without being really interested in what you're doing.
What is your relationship with teaching? How long have you been teaching? Did you teach in the public educational system, or how was your experience with teaching?
I've only taught in the state system on teaching practices. I've never had a job in the state system here, because when I finished university, a few months after that, after I graduated, I went to Madrid, and I was there for 35 years. And I was teaching adults mainly. And then in the last, I think it was 7 years, I was there. I was teaching in a private British high school, British language high school. The students were all Spanish, but it was at least bilingual.
Mm-hmm. So if you had to sum up all your years of teaching, how many would that be?
It would be 30, somewhere between 40 and 45.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell
And
you exactly.
you've been teaching in the UK, but also in other countries.
Only in Spain, but mainly in Spain. I mean, I lived most of my adult life in Madrid.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then when I came back from Spain about 10 years ago, I went to work in for the academy that you mentioned, Sol, in Barnstaple. And I worked there for about 7 years, I think, 6 or 7 years. And then I retired.
Anyway, talking from your experience as a teacher, as a tutor, how was it for you to be in the role of a teacher? And here I'd like you to insist a little bit upon the authority you felt that this role involved. What kind of authority? What kind of empowerment was it in here?
Well, I never looked upon myself as a kind of authoritarian figure, but I think, thinking about it logically, I think I must have been, without really it's being apparent to myself, because I had very, very few discipline problems. Very, very few. I did teach some young people in Madrid, and I've taught really at one time or another all ages from about 11 or 9 up to the end of high school age. And I don't really remember. Obviously, there are times when students are pushing you a bit, but that's different from being, I mean, the case that I read about with this Japanese lady in Bucharest. And I mean, that sounds just dreadful. I certainly never encountered any of that. But again, it could be because I always seem to be teaching in basically non-problematical schools and academies.
Can you please define what is a non-problematical school or environment?
Well, unfortunately, it has quite a lot to do with money. People who come from a home where there's no real money problem, and the atmosphere of the home is fairly cultivated, and one in which education is very much valued. Really, because I've nearly always taught in the private sector. And again, it's a sad fact, but people pay more respect or give more respect to something that they're actually paying for. Once money becomes involved in education, I mean, it can be a good thing. Well, it is a good thing, but it's also a bad thing. It can be both positive and negative.
So you're saying that a private educational system, the fact that it involves payment, it's also associated, it's synonym with more involvement.
Yes, I would say so. Yes, because on, actually the most negative thing about teaching in a place like that is having to meet the students' parents. The students' parents are much more problematic in general than the students themselves. Because
Mm.
because it's the parents who are paying. And I have been in I've been in schools that have had the situation where it's just unbelievable, but where the father might come in and say, why have you failed my son? I'm paying you money. Why have you failed my son? And
As if I'm paying for his competence. Yeah.
precisely. And I were situations where students, and I saw this one year in Seoul, students of whom their accompanying teachers were frightened because these students would behave badly. And so you'd have to tell the teacher, look, so and so wasn't very good in class today. Can you have a word with him? His behavior is not really acceptable. And I remember one teacher, I won't tell you the nationality, but one teacher actually, she said to me, she was a young woman, not terribly experienced. She said, I can't do anything because that boy's father paid for, I don't know if it was the swimming pool or the gym at the school.
Mm.
And she said, I can't do anything. My hands are tied.
Yeah.
And the boy concerned, he was young. For Seoul, he was young. He was about 10, I think. And he was
Yeah.
a pain in the neck.
Yeah. And you are uncovering now.
Topic, sorry.
You are uncovering now a part of reality. The fact that when we talk about public educational systems, we have to deal with the students and maybe have as a support the parents, while in the private systems, the ones that let's say do not are not partners in the game could be considered the parents because they pay.
Because I mean they treat you like they treat the school like a department store.
I love this one. They treat the school like a department store. I'm going to write this down.
And well, you know what I mean. They're buying something and they want value for their money, and if they don't get it, this sort of things happen. Why have you failed my son? Whereas I have to tell you, I once had an experience in a very small Spanish village. I went there for, I think it was only a week. I went there to set up a kind of English language project in the summer holidays. And the children, again, they range from, I think, from about 7 years old to about 15. And there are about a dozen of them. And the parents had paid a minimum amount, a very small amount for their children to go to this program every day. And it was one of the most rewarding experiences I have ever had. It was just wonderful. I would have stayed there forever because the students, they'd obviously had their parents, because their parents worked on, they worked on the land. They weren't landowners. They worked on the land for someone else. So these people were not, they were quite poor. And but the students themselves, from the very youngest, were very responsible in their attitude to what we were doing. And the parents were very, very interested. They came to the school every day when we finished, but not in an interfering way. And and they were just saying, "Oh, we're so glad you're here. This is just wonderful. This is really what the students need," and so on and so on and so on. And I think the students learnt more than just a little bit of English. Sorry, I'm going off topic. Are you interested in this?
I wrote it down, poor versus rich, and talking about the inequality in education. But let's go back to the UK. Yeah. Okay. So we had a glimpse over the private versus the public system. You said that you had experiences with both students who came from wealthy families and also from with low income background, and still you had a variety of experiences. How is the teacher perceived in the British culture nowadays?
Well, this is what I was saying earlier. They're not much respected by the government because they're not paid very well in the state
What do you mean they're not paid very well? Can you give us an example, some examples of what are the salaries, or I mean, compared to what they are not paid that well? What do you mean? Compared to, I don't know, policemen or lawyers or...
oh no, much less than a lawyer. I'm afraid
much less than a lawyer.
Oh, have you ever known a poor lawyer? It's like looking for, well, anyway. What was I going to say? I can't give you any figures because I don't know what the salary figures are. But you probably know that in this country, professions were called the caring professions.
The caring professions.
And I think we can include teachers in this. The salaries are generally pretty low because the government knows that the people who are in these sectors in general have a pretty high conscience and a pretty high sense of duty. And they know that a teacher is not going to leave a group of students in the rain waiting for whatever, when he feels he should be with them, and so on and so on. There was a wonderful example yesterday, actually. This man, in my opinion, is a hero. We had terrible rain here in Devon yesterday, and places were flooded. It was just incredible. We had a flash flood. You know what that is? They just suddenly, this huge storm. Yeah. And there was somebody on their phone filmed this junior school, when school was coming out. And the road was just a river. It was just a river.
You could not cross it.
No, a small child couldn't. And the headmaster and the other teachers were carrying the students. Well, I mean, they were children. I mean, there were 7 or 8.
Yeah, in their backs.
They were carrying the children across the road.
That's wonderful.
It was just, you just wanted to cry. It was amazing. And you see, I see that, and I think, what on earth is our government doing? Well, they're not doing anything. That's the problem. But I think that's pretty common I know it's the similar situation in Hungary. I don't know about Romania.
Yeah, it's the same here. For example, exactly today on the 10th of May, we had a protest in the capital city, organized by our unions, representing the teachers. And because that you have to follow certain steps before having a strike. And organizing a protest is a preliminary stage before the strike. And we have planned, actually, we are collecting signatures from all the teachers. We are planning to start the strike on the 22nd of May, asking for how is this called, when you have to correlate the payment with the rate of inflation, with the prices, with this hasn't been done with the teachers' salaries.
Yeah. It hasn't been. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but
I think.
I was thinking about the disproportion you mentioned between the low payment and the high conscious of duty. I also love this observation that you have introduced. Yeah, the fact that the government knows this. Yeah,
there's something awful going on here in this country, because we had I don't know if you heard, but we had a coronation the other day. You might have heard a little something in the news.
Who hasn't seen all the pictures with so much red and blue and the lovely faces of the kids and the cake.
The lovely face of Camilla, yes, it's just wonderful. And anyway, I digress. What was I going to say? Yes, somebody the day after, somebody on the television was saying, "Oh, it was a great day for Britain. That's what we really do well. That's the important thing about Britain. And what's even better is that," we didn't say it was better, but he said another great thing is that we volunteer. We are a nation of volunteers. We get out there and we do things, and we do them for nothing. And I'm thinking, yeah, this is true, but wouldn't it be better to have professional people doing all these things that we volunteer for, and giving a few people some jobs, instead of getting people to do something for nothing? I mean, I'm all for volunteering, but I think there's another face of it, another face to it, I mean.
Yeah.
But I started saying that in response to something you said, but I wanted to say something else as well. What was it you said? I'm sorry.
I think we started talking about inequalities and this comparison with poor and rich backgrounds.
Yeah. Another thing at the moment that we have here, which is, it's symptomatic. It's the same thing as teaching. We have the nurses, hospital nurses, going on strike for the first time. I think it's for the first time, full stop. Just incredible, because they've been so overworked and so badly paid for so long, and they haven't protested. They put up with it. Your conscience, you've got to look after your patients. And now in the last 2 months or so, it's just exploded, and we've got nurses on strike, and we've got junior doctors on strike. And it's all because we've had the Conservatives in power for the last 11 years, and they haven't done anything about the doctors' and nurses' salaries. They haven't been putting them up. So now, of course, the doctors and nurses are asking for a huge pay rise to cover inflation. Yeah. And we wouldn't have this problem if the government had been looking at it regularly over the last 11 years. And I think it's the same attitude goes for...
Yeah. How often do teachers go on strike in the UK? Does this happen regularly?
Well, they've been on strike, let me see, they've been on sort of staggered strikes. I think there's a strike tomorrow, actually, or is that the nurses? Everybody's on strike here at the moment, but it's the same case. Teachers' salaries have not been looked at and examined properly. It's not such a bad situation as the National Health Service workers, but it's still pretty bad. Okay. And it's like everything else. They're not only striking for more money, for a bigger salary. They're striking for smaller classes.
So they are not asking for much more payment. They're asking for the improvement of the teaching environment.
Oh yes, as well. Yes. Oh yeah.
So smaller classes. Smaller classes, like less than.
And now, of course, security.
And security. Is this an issue in the UK as well?
It's becoming an issue. Yeah, it's nothing like as bad as it is in the United States, but...
You mean the shootings in the United States?
For example, yes.
Yeah, and I presume you've also heard about the shootings happening in Belgrade, in Serbia.
Yes, in Belgrade, yeah. Whilst we're on this subject, could you tell me, there was the Japanese lady in Bucharest, and there was an English lady
Yeah, an English teacher.
of English nationality.
No. She was teaching English. She was it happened during her class. She was trying to teach English, and there were students simulating a sexual assault towards her. And she wasn't giving any signs of asking them to stop or putting any limits to their behavior.
This is in a state school.
Yes, both of the incidents happened in state schools. We don't have so many private schools in Romania, mostly in the capital city or in the big cities of Romania.
Do they tend to be religious schools?
No, it has nothing to do with
Romania is principally Orthodox or Catholic?
Yeah, Orthodox. We are a majority of Orthodox in Romania.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Do you have anything in mind?
Sorry?
Do you have anything in mind when you're asking me about the religious side?
No, it's probably living in Spain that most private schools in Spain were, well, I mean, they either were church schools or they lent over to the right
party.
Right, yeah, sort of very conservative, which really automatically means that they're pretty Catholic. So I just wondered, because that's not the same here. I mean, well, you know that religion here is it's not taken terribly seriously in general.
Okay, let's focus on. So we talked about the payment in the system. Let's go deeper. So we looked at the financial side of this role. Let's look at the safety, the psychological and the physical safety concerning this role. How safe do you think teachers in the UK feel when they reach school, when they reach their work environment? How safe do you feel? Do you think they feel?
Well, it's very difficult for me to say, but I would say, and I think this probably goes back to what I was saying a little while ago about the multi-ethnicity. I would say, and I could be mistaken, that in general, I think in school and on school property, I think most teachers feel pretty safe. I would say. Would you say that's the same for Romania?
I can give you some examples and you can draw a conclusion. If before the pandemic years, we in our staff room, we would talk about having as a hope to retire from this job, meaning most of us after 15 years of teaching look towards retirement, preparing for the retirement. Now in the staff room, the discussions among teachers are mostly connected to the mental health. We all want to get to that stage of retirement, to that age of retirement, but we want also to keep our mental health up to that point. And we are also thinking about if I cannot reach to the age of 65, this is the age when we're supposed to retire. If I cannot reach the age of 65 with my mental health intact, then I'm also prepared to advance, to retire earlier, in order to make sure that I leave this job, but my health is secure. Yeah. This is one example. Another example is that
so could I just ask you a quick question? Are you saying that teachers in Romania in general are more fearful for their mental health than for their physical well-being?
I think the main issues up to this moment was the mental health, because we went through the pandemic years. And now, since we heard about these incidents in Romania and also close to us in Serbia, we are also taking into consideration of physical health, physical safety. Yeah,
Safety.
I mean,
yes,
yeah,
yes.
physical safety. We are somehow praying. We are somehow praying that we can manage to do our jobs, securely.
Yeah, I can imagine. I think I can imagine the teacher's reaction to these two incidents that we were talking about. What have been the students' reactions?
That's very interesting of you to ask. Well, I told you that after the incidents, it was very hard for me to step into the classroom and look into their eyes. You do know that I'm a psychologist as well, and I have my own personal process in my own therapy that I'm undergoing, and I know for sure that after watching those videos, you as a teacher, you cannot look into the students' eyes, and students cannot look into the teacher's eyes without projecting traumatic fragments we have inside of us. So I was wondering, what was it in me that felt so much shame looking into my students' eyes after the videos and the news? Yeah. I think, and I discovered that it is this thing that I consider myself to be part of the system. I consider that I'm also contributing to this system, to this toxic system. And I feel powerless in the system, exactly like that English teacher felt in her class. And the image, the metaphor that I could use to associate how I'm feeling about my powerlessness is, do you remember that scene in Titanic with the musicians, with the music band performing while the Titanic was sinking?
Yes.
Yeah. I feel as if I'm part of that sinking. Yeah. And
that's interesting. You're the only person who has ever commented to me anything of any intellectual interest from that. Anyway, it's interesting. So please, sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah. So and after I analyzed myself, and I managed to ask my students, how do they perceive these incidents?
Okay.
And I got two types of answers. There were students who had no idea about what was going on in the country, because they told me that they don't watch TV. They don't use Facebook. They are mostly on Instagram, and on Instagram,
Ah, okay, yeah.
these videos weren't posted. Yeah. So they had no idea what we're talking about. And there was another group of students.
So they don't watch the news.
Yeah, they don't watch the news. They are totally
Newspaper, nothing.
disconnected. And there was another group of students who knew a lot of details that I couldn't read in the news, but somehow they heard about them. And they told me that um, um, I have to introduce this thing. The student who attacked his Japanese teacher, he he told the prosecutors, yeah, that his reason for doing it is that he felt so. He felt
Yeah,
like doing it. He felt like doing it. Yeah.
yeah.
And
I read
students,
I read a
mhm,
newspaper thing
mhm.
about it. Yes.
And students told me that there is this confusion in their groups. The fact that you're feeling one way is associated with an instinctive behavior. And they told me that it's hard for them to differentiate what I'm feeling from what I choose to do with this feeling. And for the incident with the English teacher, they thought that it was the teacher's fault. They consider that teachers are no longer acting like adults in this system. They are afraid of the system. They are afraid of asking for students to be responsive for their actions, to suffer the consequences. They see the system as it is, with so much pressure from parents and from the government, and the teachers being somehow forced to accept that with the minimum resources they've got of energy and time, this is what they can. It's the minimum they can do, yeah, to come to classes, to deliver their lessons, and to pray that they are safe all throughout this process. They don't have more energy for trials and processes, and when I say trials, I mean for taking legal action
Yes.
against,
Yeah.
against the students or their parents, because this requires not only having a certain amount of money to start with, but also to have a team to support you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the teacher in Romania is feeling as if he's alone in this.
Um,
We are surviving. I'm surviving. I'm thankful for surviving, and I know that I have to do this on my own, which sounds like the definition of trauma in my view.
And the students who could tell you how they'd felt, the students that had seen the story on TV or wherever, what was, when you asked them about it, what was their attitude? How did they tell you? I mean,
As if they wanted this. They wanted something to be done, and this thing that should have been done needs to be strict and merciless. And I suppose that what the whole society is asking for is like a repairment. There is so much abuse that is not followed by a consequence, so that when we're facing these kind of situations, we want that abuser, we want him to suffer all the consequences for all the abuse and all the abusers we have ever met.
So he needs to pay the price for what he's done and be the scapegoat for everybody else.
Right, you got it right. Yeah. Mm.
Right. What was I going to say? Yeah. Do I understand that these events, what actually happened, are actually on film?
Yeah, not the stabbing incident, but the sexual assault. Yeah.
So there are no security cameras in the classroom or anything like that?
We do have these kind of cameras in the classrooms, but they are not on. They are turned on only when we have national evaluations, national examinations. So only for this purpose only, of making sure that the examination is safe, is secure, no one is cheating. Yeah. But
Right.
not during the normal program of the school. Yeah.
Right. Because I think actually that is the case here. I think security cameras are always on in schools.
Mm. Mm.
So I don't know if that's a contributory factor to less violence here. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I think it is. I think it is the fact that you I'm talking I have in mind now a reading text from an English textbook in the 8th grade, in which it's presented a neighborhood which had a high level of criminality. I don't know if this happened in Britain or in the USA. And one of the solutions was placing mirrors and eyes, in randomly in the neighborhood. And so not cameras. They didn't start with cameras.
Yeah.
It is that big brother's eye watching you.
Yeah.
And this kind of a solution contributed to the decrease of the number of crimes in the neighborhood. So yeah, I presume that having the cameras on plays a part.
And it would be a deterrent.
For sure.
Because you see, we not to do with schools, but I mean, we are security camera crazy here. And a lot of people don't like it, but it has to be said that, I mean, there have been incidents now where, I mean, we're hearing a lot about corrupt police officers who are abusing women and worse. And it's so often been thanks to security cameras in the streets and in shops and gas stations and all this kind of play, that criminals have been caught. That their journey has been traced by security cameras here and there and so on.
I'm curious if there is an act of indiscipline, of a bad behavior in school. What are the stages? I mean, what happens first?
With regard to the teacher,
what can the teacher do about this?
Well, there's a very interesting report on where is it? Where did I see it? It must be on. It's on Google, and there's I can send it to you.
Sure.
Or I can give you the link. There's a very detailed procedure of what happens, of what can be done to prevent anything happening, and then what happens when something does happen. And I made a few notes here. It's about reducing the risk of staff assault, and it says here that 53% of British teachers have experienced some kind of aggression, and 76% have witnessed it.
Wow.
That to me is shockingly high. And there are all sorts of things about what would happen to the teacher ideally in an incident like this. I've only made some rough notes, but I can send you the article that I was looking at. You might find it interesting.
Sure, sure. I would really love to read that. And what I find interesting is that you also, in that report, you also have a section dedicated to prevention.
Yeah.
And then if the incident happens, there are steps you can follow.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a reporting procedure.
And
exactly
do teachers use this reporting procedure? Do they use it? Do they find it useful? Do they trust the procedure?
Well, one of the points in the procedure is to contact your union.
Yes.
So it goes outside the school. And then after, or the injuries have to be documented. There has to be professional counseling, a written statement, and it's then that the police get involved.
So I understand.
They have to investigate it.
Yeah, I understand that in case of an incident, you can get support as a teacher. You get support from the union.
Yeah. Well, you should get immediate support from your school.
Yes.
And then from the union, and then from lawyers and so on. If it goes on, if it comes to trial.
But what happens in school? I suppose you get some kind of support from the school, but in legal terms, who initiates the legal procedure? Is it the teacher himself? Is it the police? Is it the school? How does this work? Do you know?
I don't know, actually. I don't know which. No, I can't tell you. If it's, I would imagine that it would be the police, because they would have to arrest the aggressor. And then
even so, the teacher needs to document all the incident before before announcing the police.
That's one of the first things they have to do. I mean, the immediate thing that they have to try to do is that they should have in the school a kind of private area which is only for this kind of incident. So anybody who there's any incident of this sort, there would be an area in the school, a room or whatever, where the person would go. And I imagine it's a very comfortable room, and it's a room where it would be a good, quiet place to calm down, and that's the first thing.
Yeah. Do you have the detention room in British schools?
Yeah, you mean for students? Yeah, it's called the cooler.
Sorry,
it's called the cooler.
How do you spell that?
COOLER. It's called the cooler, and it's a room where students are sent to be on their own for a little while. If whatever's happened,
like cool down, a sort of a cooling down room.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, if you've got a student who is just talking all the time and just being a pain in the neck, you say, right, I think you need to go to the cooler for a few minutes.
And while he's in the cooler, does anyone supervise him? Is there any teacher, any adult?
Well, we didn't have this in Spain because it wasn't the custom. But I would imagine there must be somebody who is keeping an eye on the cooler, at least. It's also the place where students go for detention after school, you know.
After school. So the detention happens after you finish your program, your school program.
Well, yes, it does. Yeah, but I would say that's for more serious things.
Like?
Well, if somebody, well, in the high school I taught in Madrid, students had detention if they were heard speaking in Spanish, because they were supposed to be speaking in English all the time. So if you heard someone speaking Spanish, I mean, obviously it was to your discretion. But I mean, if you heard somebody repeatedly speaking in Spanish and...
how many times repeatedly? For example, in my class, you know that I'm teaching English. In my class, I give my students free warnings. Yeah. I mean, if I heard them speaking once in Romanian, I give a warning, second time, and the third time, in the same 50 minutes, in the same class, I have to give this warning, then the warning comes with the consequence. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it would be more or less the same in my place. Yeah. And then what happens in Romania? Can you keep them after school or not?
No, we don't have this notion of detention.
Right. Because now that I think of it, our detention was during the breaks. They would have to go to the cooler during break or part of lunchtime.
But anyway, it was their free time that they were supposed to be in this room.
Yeah.
And what kind of activities were they allowed to do in the Kula? For example, were they allowed to use the mobile phone? Are they allowed?
They weren't allowed to use mobile phones anywhere in the school. Unless a teacher wanted. Yeah, no, actually they couldn't have, because when they arrived at school, they had to leave their mobile phone in the office. They weren't allowed to have their phones in school. Yeah. But as to what they should be doing, well, I mean, for Spanish students, a restriction on freedom and not being allowed to go outside and talk with their friends, I mean, that really was punishment enough. That was just the worst thing you could do. But I mean, I don't know, it depended on the teacher. I mean, the teachers don't want to be in the detention room any more than the students do. I don't know. I mean, they might say, well, you know, do your homework. Or, you know, bring a book which is relevant to one of your classes and read it, or, you know, do something. Or maybe just sit there and do nothing.
Wow.
Which can often be the worst thing.
Worst, that's right.
Oh, yeah. I never did that because I didn't want some student staring at me resentfully whilst he was being punished. No.
You wanted to diverge somehow his resentment.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. But Paul, how was it for you to be the one to be? We're the teachers in the system, but how is it for you to be the one who puts the limits, who indicates the limit, who keeps repeating up to which point, up to which extent your behavior is okay and when it becomes not okay?
I think that's very difficult. And I think, even though it sounds unfair, very often it adapts itself to each individual student. I mean, you have to, it sounds horrible, but in a way, you have to get them where it hurts them most. That sounds horrible, but unfortunately, it works.
So you're saying that for you it was a continuous exercise, as if you were continuing rehearsing, indicating the limits.
In general, I had my boundaries very clearly marked, and I think that's very important, because then you know where you are, because you've invented the system, and the students know where they are, and they know the limits. And then if the limits are pushed, again, depending on circumstances, because obviously if you take a group out somewhere, a lot of discipline becomes, well, some discipline becomes relaxed, and what hasn't been discipline up until now becomes discipline, because you know, the circumstances are different. I don't know if I'm explaining myself very well.
I understand that you consider this process of indicating boundaries a sort of adapting, personalizing, depending on the student, depending on the activity.
Yeah, you have to be very careful, because that, you know, changing your attitude from student to student can often be seen as
Favoring some students.
Unfair. Well, not exactly favoring them. Well, you know, as a psychologist, that you have to be able to read your students. And so, again, you know, it's like finding out what interests them. You know, so you have to use your knowledge of them.
Like you need to build a relationship with them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that was what, and I think that comes across. I think that was, I was interested in them, and I liked all of them except a couple. in 7 years, I had 2 students in that British high school that I really did not like very much at all, and I had to make a huge effort with them. But in general, I liked them. But I think you like them because you get on well with them, and you get on well with them because I think they sense that you are interested in them.
Mm-hmm. I see.
Do
you think it makes any difference? Do you think it made any difference that you were a male teacher? In what way?
Yeah, I've noticed that, not so much in Spain, but I noticed it enormously at Sol one year. We had a couple of groups of students from Morocco, and there were 3 teachers teaching this group, the 2 women and me. And I was the only teacher who liked them. And I think that's for 2 reasons. One, because I'm used to sort of the Mediterranean, if we can say that, the Mediterranean way of doing things. And in the classroom, that often involves a lot of noise. And I know that you cannot do anything about that. Trying to get the students to be quiet, it's a waste of time. You have to work along with it. Otherwise, you are going to waste a lot of time in saying, "Oh, shh, be quiet, no, keep your voices down." No, don't do it. It's useless. But yeah, because they were Moroccans and therefore Muslim, they respect male teachers much more than they do women. Much more. I noticed that there were 2 lady Moroccan teachers with them, and another woman who was actually French. and they respected her much more than the two Moroccan women teachers. And they respected enormously the Moroccan men teachers who were with them.
But
Yeah, so
usually in the
it can make a difference.
educational system, most 90% of the people are women. At least in Romania. How is the case in the UK? I suppose they're mostly women.
I think it depends on the age group, because obviously for small children and maybe for middle school as well, there are probably for small children, definitely mostly women, I would say. For middle school, I don't know. I feel that there would probably be more women. And then in high school, I think it's probably fairly even or slightly more men.
Wow.
I think.
I did not know that.
You can probably check the figures.
Let's go towards
you also have to bear in mind that in Spain, the woman has a very special place, because I mean it's a Catholic country, so the whole idea of your mother and your sister, and these are people to be respected, to take care of, and it's all connected with the Catholic Church. It's all to do with Our Lady.
With the expanded system.
Yeah. But I think that's Spanish society in general.
In the last minutes of this talk, I'd like to look, it's 8 minutes past 7 already. Let's get out of the school environment and look at the society around it. How do you think the topic of security, of safety, how do you think the society impacts the school from this point of view? I mean, is there any connection? Is the security only a problem in the school that the school has to do something in order to undo it, to repair it, because I look at things from a systemic point of view, and I cannot imagine that school is like a parallel system to what's going on in society. Putting boundaries is happening only in schools. I don't think so. It's how we raise children, in families, and then how we act in relationships at work, in close relationships, in friendships. How do you look at this systemic
do you mean
view?
how does the cog of school fit into the whole machine?
Into the whole picture.
How does it? Well, I think, going back to what I was saying about volunteers, we have a lot of people who go into schools volunteering to work, especially in junior, for smaller children, and help. I mean, we have a program here, a literacy program, where older people, often retired teachers, going back into school to help smaller children or children who have recently arrived in this country to learn English and to read and help them in general. Volunteers, wonderful people, but I still think there should be professionals doing that. Give people a job, give people a salary.
So we're going back
actually
to money.
One point connected with that, I'd like to say, I don't know if you know about the problem here with the food bank system. Do you know about that?
No, no,
A food bank is a place
never
where you
heard
can
of.
go. It's a place where you can go if you're on a very restricted income, and depending on your circumstances, you can go where they will give you food.
Mhm.
You know, in packets, in cans, and fresh stuff, and all that. And all this food is given to the food bank by a type of volunteer. You know, very often in supermarkets now, when you go to pay, there's a box by the cash register, and you can put a couple of the things that you buy into this box, and that will be taken to the food bank.
Mhm.
Teachers, in some cases, have to use the food bank. Sorry,
Wow.
that's just going back to a teacher's salary.
Mhm.
For the number of professional people now who have to use a food bank here, it's there are no words. It's just appalling. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the very, very poorest people who were more or less on the street, these were the people who would go to a food bank for them to get food. And now the number of food banks has increased incredibly. And the number of people who use them, and the number of people who are earning, you know, a fair wage, but they still can't pay their bills because
Mhm.
their wages and their salaries are so low. And depending on the report you read, Britain is supposed to be the 7th or the 5th most active economy in the world. We
It
are
is
rich.
supposed to be. It
Well, it is, but what I want to know is where's the money? Well, we know where the
Where's the
money
money?
is.
Well, yeah. Mm.
You look at the front bench of the House of Commons on the Conservative side, of course. There is not one person sitting there who is not a millionaire. It's just appalling.
So, Paul, what I
Appalling.
understand you're trying to say is that in the educational system, we have more and more poor people, people who cannot afford to survive,
Yeah, yeah,
and they are being paid less and less.
yeah. And during the school holidays, particularly the summer, schools are staying open, or at least the dining room, so that children of a lower income family can go to school to have a hot lunch.
Mhm. What I hear is that schools have turned into social centers.
Well,
At
I,
least,
w-
at
I
least
wouldn't
the public schools.
I wouldn't the state schools.
Yeah, the state schools.
Yeah. Um, I'm not sure that I would go quite as far as that, but I think we're certainly on the way. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Paul, if if we um, if we could choose to end this talk, this live talk, this discussion with a thought or a hope for all the teachers in the world, not necessarily those living in Romania or in the UK, and imagine, Paul, that whatever your thought is, your hope is, the moment you speak it up or out, sorry, I don't get the preposition right now. The moment you say it out loud, imagine that it becomes real, but not right now, in 10 years time. What that thought, uh,
Just one.
yeah, a thought or a
Oh,
hope, yeah.
respect, actually. Respect. I think there's a terrible lack of respect in the world, everywhere. You know, respect just seems to be something that people it's like a buzzword. You know, people talk about it very automatically, but like any word that's cheapened, it loses effect. But I think if there was more respect, then I don't know. I suppose you have to have imagination. I mean, if you can encourage students to think to themselves, well, look, you've got your 5-year plan. You've got 5 years here, and then, you have 5 years at university, then you'll be better qualified to get a decent job. You'll be able to have your family. You'll be able to help your family. You'll be able to travel and so on and so on. But you won't be able to do that unless the government respects you by granting you bigger salaries and better conditions and better materials and better buildings. It's all so inextricably linked and tied up. But I think respect might be a good word.
Okay, then let's leave this discussion with this in mind, with this word in mind, respect, but the real respect. The real respect. Yeah.
Considered respect.
Considered respect. I love this one. Considered respect. Thank you, Paul. Thank you for finding the time to.
It's been very interesting.
Yeah, for me too. And please send me the report that you mentioned on Google, so that I can post it in the comments of this talk. Yeah, so that people who are watching us or will be watching us later on, they can have access to it.
Okay, right. I'll have to try to learn again how to send something from Google, but don't worry, I shall. I'm a bit busy tonight, but tomorrow I'm fairly free, so I'll try and send it to you then.
Great. Okay. So considered respect.
Yeah, But I think in many walks of life, it's something which seems to have, I don't know, extinguished, which is awful.
Okay. Good evening and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you. Thank you. It's lovely seeing you again.
Me too.
Okay. Take care then.
Take care.
Okay.